Don't forget your definitions. By don't forget your definitions, I'm saying don't forget to define all these words that we use that supposedly are super important to us. If you talk about love a lot, I hope you're defining it. I hope you're not just abiding by with automaticity the notion of love that you've received through osmosis by the world. I hope you define it for yourself. For example, what does it mean to love yourself? Can you define that? I'll give you my definition. My definition of loving yourself means to treat myself right despite. And then I have to further define. You have to keep going. What do you mean by right? And what do you mean by despite? What I mean by right is give myself nourishment, force myself to engage in physical activity, despite how monstrously difficult that becomes. Force myself to engage in honest, transparent, vulnerable dialogue, no matter how squirmish or how uncomfortable the honesty and the transparency and the vulnerability might feel. Especially with yourself, first and foremost. Forget even if you don't have to say another word to another human being for the rest of your life. It's very important that you, with yourself, have honest, critical dialogue. That's what it means to treat myself right. To make sure I'm getting myself sleep. Don't not to punish myself by malnourishing myself. Not to punish myself by not doing healthy habits and engaging. If anything, I have to engage more so. I have to strive more so. I have to put more effort into the healthy habit. That's what's treating myself right, despite giving an example. Somebody I love, I still want you to be nourished. I still want you to have a healthy meal, whether or not we disagree. Somebody I care about, I still want you to get your rest. I still want you to be the healthiest, most optimized version of yourself. Because this world every single day is a fight. I don't want you to suffer. I don't want you to degrade if you can help it. That's what it means to me by treating somebody right, by treating yourself right, despite how much you might disappoint yourself, despite how much you might momentarily hate yourself, despite how much momentarily you might be ashamed of a decision or a behavior that you engaged in. You have to treat yourself right. With any pet owners out there, when your pet makes some kind of a mistake, despite how much you might be in a state of disapproval towards your wonderful animal, you want them to be nourished. You want them to have a safe space. You want them to have a good life. You love them despite the wrong they committed. That's what you and I should be doing with ourselves. You know, funny enough, when it comes to treating yourself right, despite, right? You got people who are very much so toxic individuals. That word toxic is just so appropriate, by the way. No matter how much is used, it's just the perfect word because it perfectly describes the occurrence, what occurs when human beings are engaged in these negative, destructive, unhelpful behaviors. Is quite a poisonous, like radiating, incrementally degrading, destructive, detrimental, unraveling thing. And we see people who are really awful, right? And you see them, and then it's like, man, they must really love themselves because they are treating themselves right, despite they seem to have no conscience. They seem to not even have begun to admit anything to themselves. And like, do they deserve to be treating themselves right, despite? Like, do they deserve to be quote unquote loving themselves? And here's the bottom line is, again, going back to scripture, you know how that Jesus says, render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's. I'll say this. People are going to do what they're going to do, no matter how awesome, no matter how horrible. I've never seen a toxic individual really be truly a healthy individual to begin with. Because part of the 4 pillars of stability that I abide by, subscribe to, is healthy conversations. And another way to refer to a healthy conversation is a cathartic conversation. It is a very much so nourishing conversation, whether it's with you and you alone or with others. And they're not treating themselves right because I would argue that that's no life to live. That is no life to live, to not be honest about your inconsideration, to not be honest about being a mindless individual, to be to being a profoundly self-centered individual. I would argue that no matter how seemingly well a toxic individual is living, that's no life to live. Like, maybe perhaps we can agree to disagree. Like, I never envy the toxic, because to me that's hell. To me that's hell, because honesty is nothing. Let me talk about self-honesty for a moment. Self-honesty has nothing to do with a book telling me that it's a good thing to do. Self-honesty has nothing to do with me wanting to please anybody for the sake of ingratiating into our this moral framework. I want to be moral. I want to do good. I want to do the right thing. I would argue that self-honesty is good objectively. Even if you were a villain, self-honesty is a good thing. I would argue that to be self-honest is to merely be an honest observer of your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior. Nothing more, nothing less. And intrinsic in that, that allows energy to flow within you without being trafficked, without this obstruction, without this double, triple, quadruple mindedness, without a kind of self-consciousness. Were you to be a villain who admitted, yep, I just love oppressing people, you arguably will be a better villain than being delusional. So I'm saying the ability to be self-honest is really like the damn, hey, I am not at all. I'm not a Star Wars hater. I'm not a Star Wars lover. But the Force can be used by evil people, and the Force can be used by good people. And you see that the Force is still powerful when it's used by bad people. It's the same. It's the same kind of. It's just same template. Same template. The power and the magic of self-honesty. It can be used whatever kind of character you are, but it's just calling a spade, and that is just a helpful ability and a useful and necessary ability if you want to be the most optimized, most energized, most self-actualized version of yourself. And I apologize if these all seem like buzzwords to you, but self-actualize and optimize, I agree with. People tend to talk about these terms, particularly in the context of just moving up the social ladder, but I'm talking about them in the context of it's just helpful, even if you're a human being who lives in solitude. So much of our bad decisions is due to a jumbled, polluted, discombobulated mind. That's another word I love. Discombobulated is just such a great way to describe the state of our internal beings, because we're not admitting that, you know what? I guess I really just let the world tell me what happiness is. I let the world tell me what love is. And how about this? I got one for you. Happiness. And maybe I'll just end it here when I talk about happiness too. I made a big to-do about happiness about several years ago. I had this big journey, this big chapter where I asked myself a question, am I happy? And then I asked myself another question to define happiness. And then, similar to Bertrand Russell's book, The Conquest of Happiness, I went on this conquest. I'm like, what is happiness and how do I define it? And what I found for me, what was revealed to me in regards to my definition of happiness is not at all, nor can it be, just the mere state of a sense of pleasure arousal, just a state of like pleasure juice flowing through you. That's definitely not happiness. Just because this notion of people, they look happy because they're just doing like this. They're happy. Aren't they happy? It's like, calm down. That is a very, with all due respect, I would argue that is a juvenile perception of what happiness is. I would argue that happiness in the more adult chapter of your life, even though there will be this naturally. There's laughs in my life. There's smiles in my life. But happiness to me is is a sense of stability. Not stability from simply having bills paid, not stability from merely just having shelter and food. Those matter. I'm talking about an internal, deeply rooted cognitive sense of peace. And that it comes from a kind of that comes from a lot of battles being won with regards to comprehending yourself. The kind of peace and stability I'm talking about comes from a perspective. Happiness to me is a perspective, I guess you could say. It is a perception. It is an acknowledgement. It is an acceptance. It's a state of mind that revolves around, I believe, being grounded and calling a spade a spade. Happiness is like it's the absence of a denial for me. And it's also the absence of unjustified judgment. Because you could definitely say, hey, like we're Silence of the Lambs. It puts the lotion on the skin or else it gets the hole again. The people who were trapped in the hole from Buffalo Bill, from the serial killer. I'm not saying that, you know what, guys, just change your state of mind and you'll be happy while you're down there in that pit. It's fine. Your conditions matter. I'm not saying environment doesn't matter. I'm not saying that whether or not somebody is oppressing you and hurting you doesn't matter. But many of us are not in those kinds of circumstances. And many of us do have space and time to be grateful. We have space and time to engage in the lifestyle habits that contribute to a sense of perspective and peace and to a groundedness and to the realization that, man, I have it really good. All things considered. And it's also, happiness also for me is greatly the absence of wants. And for many years I have practiced. In my own mind, the dialogue is literally let go of your wants, let go of your wants. I chase and tap into a trance-like state, and then I essentially self brainwash myself. Ever seen like somebody's hypnotized? You will now be blah, 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 blah. It's like self-hypnotization in a sense, even though I'm fully aware of what's going on. But I take these opportunities where my mind is highly receptive and highly impressionable. And then I will say to myself, let go of your wants. Let go of your wants. And it works. And it's not something that then, because people are they like to be such extremists when it comes to this kind of thing, where it's like, you can't live without having any wants. You can't. Of course, I'm helplessly, painfully human. Everything that I'm speaking to is purely an exercise, and it's purely like you can build all the muscle you would like. If you do not maintain it, you will lose it. You can get in all the shape that you would like. If you do not maintain it, you will lose it. Same thing with your cognitive competencies. Like you use it or lose it. And so if we ain't growing, we're only falling apart. If we're not developing, we're only falling apart. So with regards to letting go of my wants, it's a temporary feat. And it lasts for just as long as like a good meal might last. You know what I'm saying? It might nourish you, or maybe longer than that. But the point is that it works. And the point is that there's something very much so, going back to that word, cathartic about it. Cathartic meaning a significant sense of relief, a significant sense of release. And it is very helpful and it contributes to my momentum moving forward for the day after day after day. And then to get on that momentum, that's the name of the game. To engage in the practices, to engage in exercises so that we might begin our next moments more fortified, more clear-minded, much more able. So many of us, here's the problem with acting as if this is even optional. Because I'm very kind, and I say, everyone doesn't have to live this way. I see people don't need to live this way. But I would argue that the vast majority of people, especially in America, would benefit from these kind of practices and these kind of lifestyle habits, because we do have a lifestyle choice, a lifestyle habit a lifestyle sort of normalized that everybody subscribes to that is honestly is quite philosophical, even though it's not, it's more implicit and tacit than it is outright, straightforwardly, consciously communicated. And that is stuff, appearance, just keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with the Joneses. What's everybody else doing? What's that? To even talk about this thing of FOMO. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't feel FOMO. The reason why I don't feel FOMO is because I know what makes me feel good, truly feel good. And what makes me truly feel good is the here and now. So there can't be any notion of I'm not saying that when I was when I was in my early 20s, I remember certain delusions. If this just happens, then I'll be happy. I literally would think this. If I just get this, then I'll be happy. If I just if this changes in my life, I'll be happy. I literally remember thinking that like when I was like 20 years old, right? But you have to, it's no, what makes me happy is being grounded and present in the here and now and not denying any of the bitterness, any of the sweetness. It is a lot to do with a meditative, contemplative, present moment, stand your ground. Don't be fixated on, I need to get to the future. I need to stay in the past. All that exists is this moment. And then this moment, and then this moment. It's a bit of a feat. It is not something that is a light switch, but that is where my happiness lies. And that's where I would argue that your baseline should be, can you feel a sense of quote unquote happiness from simply just being? Then from there, as we might say in New Orleans, it's all lanyard. It's purely, when I do seemingly mundane things, when I have seemingly just mundane, typical everyday interactions, for me, it's super rich and heightened. Because that stillness that I'm talking about, that letting go of my desires that I'm talking about, that fortification and that clearing out the circuitry and the energetic pathways of my internal being, that kind of internal hygiene makes everything feel so much more rich. When I interact with people, it feels like a joy because I'm sensitive again. It resensitizes me to everything else, to everything that is not just pure stillness. But first, I need to be one with stillness. I need to be one with silence. I need to be one with just simply being. And I can't stress enough, it's absolutely easier said than done. But it's something to be done. And so happiness for me is a perspective that is essentially garnered from letting go of your wants, from not denying any of the honest thoughts or feelings that rise to the surface, and not necessarily even indulging them, but just observing them, watching them, because that's another thing. You have that ability too. This is the boring stuff nobody wants to talk about, but it's changed my life to realize this, to discover this within myself. I mean, this is something that people discover. I'm not saying that I'm the one who discovered this, but I'm saying each person has this opportunity to discover this ability within themselves. And I call it sitting on the perch of the observer, but there's this observational perch within you, in between your ears, behind your eyes. You can look at your thoughts and your thoughts aren't you. You can look at your feelings and your feelings aren't you. You are merely just observing them non-judgmentally. And what happens is when this process is over, you feel like a brand new person and you are really, truly ingrained and grounded into the moment. And you feel renewed, quite frankly. Your insecurities, where they go? Your clarity, like you wonder how you've been living without it.